There are certain people who, whenever they see a queer character, or character of whatever marginalized group, that is not sufficiently watered down to be palatable for a mass audience, people who are like, I don't care if they're gay, just don't rub it in my face, just like be normal. Or really, if they see that kind of character at all. It could be a very tame, culturally homogenized version of whatever identity, or it could be a female character that doesn't make them horny enough. A character having a disability could upset them, even though disabled people exist. It doesn't matter. There's a lot they get mad at. And they get so mad and they say that forced diversity is ruining movies or TV or comic books or video games or whatever. This type of pissed off nerd has a preconceived notion of themselves as the default. And anything that challenges that or makes them uncomfortable or forces them to rethink their prejudices is a threat. And they rationalize their fear and anger by deciding what they're looking at has to be a cynical money-grabbing marketing ploy, and couldn't possibly be an honest reflection of someone else's experience, and a sign that whatever media they like is no longer exclusively for them, if it ever was. I want to note that these people are petty, selfish, stupid, and often bigoted, and have such a limited imagination regarding what media can do, and react with violence and outrage when they see, like, a trans character or a Muslim character, which is self-evidently comically immature. The most death threats and pissed off comments I have ever gotten were not from my videos that got a lot of views or my more confrontational political videos. They were from when I very gently criticized how Oda portrays women and queer people in One Piece. These people are very, very protective of their big titty anime girls and react with violence when challenged. And then sometimes I'll see progressive people say in response, what even is forced diversity? As if the term itself is a contradiction. And I agree that forced diversity is a bad term, and that we live in a very diverse world, and that it's great when media reflects that. But I'm also not going to pretend that certain big companies, or even certain independent creators, don't cynically use representation as a marketing tool, taking ill-conceived, surface-level understandings of marginalized communities, often misrepresentations, or watered-down representations intended to be palatable and inoffensive, and thus much more marketable than a more confrontational and honest representation, and wearing those lackluster representations as if they were a badge of honor. I've talked about this before. Whatever delusion people were under that Lady Ghostbusters was a feminist triumph, when Sony would not allow Kate McKinnon's character to be gay, is a good example. And that brings us to Screen Time, SAFESPACE, and Snowflake. What I'm about to read is not made up, it is not a joke or exaggeration, it is from the Marvel.com website page about the new Warriors. Screen Time. A meme-obsessed super teen whose brain became connected to the internet after being exposed to his grandfather's experimental internet gas. Now he can see augmented reality and real-time maps, and can instantly Google any fact.
The word screen time is only ever used in a sort of restrictive sense, and because we're doing a story about teenage rebels, a lot of the names are about teens fighting against labels that are put on them. So with screen time, we liked the idea that he has infinite screen time.
Snowflake and SAFESPACE, who are twins, and Snowflake is non-binary. They're hyper-aware of modern culture and optics, and they see their superheroics as a post-ironic meditation on using violence to combat bullying. They're probably streaming this.
And their names are very similar to screen time. It's this idea that these are terms that get thrown around on the internet that they don't see as derogatory, to take those words and kind of wear them as badges of honor. The connotations of the word snowflake in our culture right now are something fragile. And this is a character who is turning it into something sharp.
The other heroes are B-negative, a vampire, because the world is a vampire, and TRAILBLAZER, which it's legitimately cool that they have a fat superhero, but she's getting like Dora the Explorer comparisons online with the magic backpack, and I can't tell if she's meant to be seen as indigenous or not, but to me, TRAILBLAZER has like Trail of Tears connotations. I don't know if I'm reaching there. It's certainly not as bad as naming a, I guess, black, non-binary character Snowflake. When I saw this, being myself on a queer teen superhero actual play show where I play a short, stocky lesbian with an undercut, I made a joke about characters named White Knight, Soy Boy, and Mr. Cucklord, and that got some funny responses, and we even got a like Virgin Chad meme comparing our show to the New Warriors that also made me laugh. Basically everything about this is terrible, and it's very easy to make fun of or slot in other common internet insults like cuck or soy boy to further emphasize how lazy and ridiculous these character names are, because they're that rare mix of transparent pandering to people of certain identities and certain demographics, and a total misfire on every level, to where most people, regardless of political beliefs or identity, but especially the people they're supposed to represent, are going to hate them. I also saw it pointed out on Twitter that if you're making a meme kid in a progressive comic, maybe green is a bad color choice. And what is Grandpa's internet gas? What child over the age of 11 cares about the concept of screen time? And there's just so much going on with Snowflake and SAFESPACE. For one, I am not the kind of person who tends to label myself with what regressive trolls online call me, because I want to avoid viewing myself according to the parameters set by bigots who hate me and want to hurt me. I would rather that not play into my identity at all. I'll maybe do it sometimes as a joke, but I try to avoid it. And no disrespect to people who do this, but I'm not going to put SJW or a variation of that in my Twitter bio. I also believe it's imperative to take the concept of reclaiming slurs seriously, and it's implied by Kibblesmith that they're doing that here. And Snowflake is an insult used a lot against queer people and millennials, and is indicative of a big culture gap, where empathy and attempts at being inclusive are seen as weakness. But I'm sorry, if we're talking about reclaiming slurs, let's talk about the extremely complicated history of the N-word, or lesbians proudly calling themselves dykes, or how queer people use the word faggot. I don't think Snowflake is comparable to the word faggot, which is what people hear when they get beaten in hate crimes. Snowflake and SAFESPACE are used by bullies online to insult people who dare to be empathetic and sincere, but they're the most inoffensive, tame terms. I can't imagine ever feeling the need to bleep them, like Snowflake or SAFESPACE. And they're not original or clever at all as character names either. Shore Leave is a fun and clever name for a flamboyant gay character, and a character whose name and identity aren't set by the parameters of what bigots call him on the internet. Also, as has been pointed out a lot online, why would you call a, I guess, black character Snowflake? Why does the non-binary character have to be the femme twin to a male character? Why are they touching each other like this if they're related? And it's not cool or brave to make the male one pink. You don't flip a binary and suddenly the binary is canceled out. And if you're using the trans flag colors here, why is the brother is supposed to be cis, so it doesn't make sense. A lot of the response I saw from queer and progressive spaces was why didn't they have an actual queer person work on this? And the thing is, they did. The two people who designed these characters are Daniel Kibblesmith and Luciano Vecchio. And Vecchio is very openly queer. And his Twitter bio has mostly he, him, which is maybe indicative of a not binary gender identity. I don't know. I think it's best not to speculate past someone's boundaries and what they openly self-identify as. I will just say that he is definitely not straight. But the issue here comes down to the question of perceived authenticity, which is very important when you're trying to market yourself to marginalized groups, and on top of that, pretending to be transgressive and brave, that you're pushing boundaries with teenage rebels. Perceived authenticity is subjective, certainly. Like I said, to some people online, any expression of a certain identity is perceived as inauthentic and wrong. So in my opinion, as long as you're being empathetic and considerate, you should just express yourself how you want in your life and in your work. And those people can just deal with it. But the New Warriors were such a misstep that they're being almost universally perceived as inauthentic. And at least one queer person was involved, so this was not strictly a case of having people with no lived experiences working on a comic about certain types of characters. I don't know what went wrong, but I can hypothesize that in trying to strike a balance between honoring marginalized communities and being edgy, but edgy in a safe, marketable way, you call me a snowflake? Well then I'm Snowflake. With reclaiming internet insults, they flew too close to the sun, tried way too hard, and made something intensely embarrassing and off-putting. I don't like watching people fail, and I genuinely feel bad for Kibblesmith and Vecchio. They seemed really excited about this project and seemed to really believe in what they were doing. But it's foolish to make something obvious, something surface level, throw in online buzzwords, and wear it all as a badge of honor, like you're a brave crusader in the culture wars. You're setting yourself up for a brutal failure. I do think it is important to support marginalized artists telling their own stories. And I have no interest in policing anyone's stories to make sure they represent themselves just right according to my own subjective measure of our own mutual experience. But someone being in a particular group doesn't automatically mean they're the best representative of that group. It's important for anyone writing characters that belong to a marginalized group and becoming a self-appointed representative of a marginalized community, to not be blinded by self-righteousness, or I guess be blinded by a Marvel paycheck and marketing team. If you want to read a queer comic that I would consider actually brave, check out Feast for a King. I reviewed it recently, and I'll link my review in the description. It's super weird and upsetting and gross and sometimes fun and sometimes off-putting, and always an engaging read, with a million trans and queer characters. And I guarantee no part of it was designed to be palatable, or like designed in a lab to be just transgressive enough without upsetting anyone. Which of course would just upset everyone. And on the teen superhero show I'm on top of my character being gay, one of the other main characters is asexual, and her superhero name is Ace. And somehow, my fellow co-host, Shelby, miraculously found a way to incorporate a character's sexuality into her superhero identity without upsetting anyone. In fact, we have a lot of asexual fans. Maybe because she didn't name the character like The Prude, or Just a Phase Girl. And believe it or not, I did not name my character Stupid Feminist, or I am a lesbian and people on the internet do not like that. Also, shout out to Unlabeled, which is a podcast using the same system we use that is run by all trans women playing all trans PCs. There are a million great queer teen superhero stories out there, and teen superhero stories made by people of color and disabled people and people in a variety of marginalized groups. Our group's just outside of what is traditionally considered a superhero. I don't know Samantha Bryant, but she panels at a lot of the same conventions as me, and she has a series of books on menopausal superheroes. I haven't read any of them, so I cannot endorse the material, but whenever I walk by her table at a con, I think, that's neat. That's someone putting her own experiences into a genre in a unique way, and certainly not as a cynical marketing tool. Thanks for watching! If you enjoyed this video, please consider supporting me on Patreon or Ko-fi. I got the insulting fake names for Ace from a thread on the asexuality.org forums, which I will link in the description. Would people want me to actually read this comic and review it? Would there be any interest in that? If people would be interested in that, I will buy it and read it. But if by that point nobody would care, I don't know if I would waste my time. Anyway, thanks!